good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraftman James Anning. This evening, we are honoured to welcome Second World War veteran Mr. John Mackenzie. John initially enlisted with the Australian Army in 1943 before joining the Royal Australian Air Force. He served as a leading aircraftman with No. 10 Repair and Salvage Unit. Deployed to New Guinea, this unit serviced and salvaged aircraft, including the Curtiss P-40 Kitty Hawk and Douglas Dakota C-47s. John, we thank you for your service and for joining us here this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could come to mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Charles Roland Bird. Charles Bird was born on the 22nd of September 1916 in Fremantle, Western Australia, the son of Roland and Beatrice Bird. Known to friends and family as Charlie, he went on to work as a bread carter. Charlie Bird enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 25th of October 1940. By the end of the year, he had joined the 2nd 4th Machine Gun Battalion and begun training at Northern Military Camp, east of Perth. In early January 1941, Private Bird was charged with breaking out of camp and was confined to barracks for 3 days as punishment. In July, Bird had a period of pre-embarkation leave before his unit moved to Adelaide. After suffering from acute gastritis in August, by October, he and his unit were in Darwin, joining the rest of the 23rd Brigade. Told of the move just before Christmas, the battalion left Darwin on the 30th of December, sailing via Port Moresby. Following a Japanese attack in Rabaul, New Britain, the convoy turned around and sailed to Sydney and then Fremantle. Sailing under escort, the convoy finally reached Singapore at the end of January 1942. By this time, the Japanese had captured Malaya and were preparing to attack Singapore. The British were desperately preparing their defences, and the battalion's companies were sent where they were needed. B Company was sent to the British Manchester Fusiliers, constructing weapons pits around the naval base. C Company went to support the 44th Indian Brigade on the west and southwest coast of the island. D Company supported the 22nd Brigade on the northwest coast. And A Company was in the 8th Division's reserve, close to the centre of the island. After days of air raids, the Japanese attacked Singapore on the 8th of February. Deployed to different units, the 2nd Force companies were quickly in action. But by the 10th of February, the Japanese had captured the island's west coast. 5 days after the British forces were pushed back to a defensive line protecting the city. With battle over, on the 15th of February, Singapore was surrendered. The machine gunners suffered heavily. Between the 8th and 15th of February, the unit had 137 men killed or missing, 106 men wounded, and 24 described as having shell shock. These casualties constituted almost 1/3 of the battalion. Among the casualties was Private Bird, who was admitted to hospital with a shell wound to his shoulder, elbow, and thigh on the 15th of February. Bird was initially held in Salarang Barracks, the AIF camp at Changi. His wounds were treated in the hospital established by the Australian prisoners, and by the start of April, he had recovered sufficiently to return to his unit. His time in Changi, however, was to be short. In early July, he embarked with B-Force, a group of about 1,500 Australians, which left Singapore aboard one of the notorious hell ships, bound for Sandakan in North Borneo. Arriving in mid-July, the prisoners marched to Sandakan No. 1 prisoner of war camp, where they were told they would construct an airfield. Conditions and food supplies were initially reasonable, but deteriorated in mid-1943, partly because of the arrival of brutal Formosan guards. A small cage was built within the camp to punish prisoners for trivial offences. Some men were confined, without being able to stand up and with little food, for as long as a month. The situation worsened in 1944, with brutal beatings, torture, and shrinking food supplies. Prisoners suffered from malaria, beriberi, and tropical ulcers, and the number of men who were sick grew. Because of the lack of healthy prisoners for work parties, guards pulled sick men from their beds. Bash gangs attacked prisoners in numbers for the slightest misdemeanor. If one prisoner was viewed as not working properly, any number of men in his group could be beaten. In January 1945, the Japanese began to fear an Allied invasion of Borneo and started to move prisoners away from the coast to Ranau, a small village some 250 kilometres inland in the mountains. The first group of 470 prisoners, including 350 Australians, left in batches of 50. All of them were already weak with beriberi and malnutrition, and most lacked boots. Only 6 of some 2,500 Australian, British prisoners interned at Sandakan in northeastern Borneo would survive. Among the dead was Charlie Bird, who died at a jungle camp about 8 kilometres south of Ranau. Today, he is remembered at the Labuan Memorial, which commemorates officers and men of the Australian Army and Air Force who died while prisoners of war in Borneo and the Philippines. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Charles Roland Bird, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.